Hi guys, welcome back to Keep It Simple, and this is going to be episode number 2. Now, there's a lot of things that I want to go over, and I'm not going to dive deep into rabbit holes. I'm going to share with you rabbit holes, and we're going to have to go down a couple rabbit holes together just to let you understand what the rabbit hole really is and that I know what I'm talking about. But going forward from here, we really want to focus on a couple things that I feel like get overlooked. And one of the biggest misconceptions, in my opinion, is that sometimes a lot of people, when they buy the bow itself, they think they can go cheaper on the bow and then over-accessorize on the accessories to make up for what the bow doesn't. So I think that's a really bad, misleading thing that I see. So here's my take on importance on purchase. Okay, first and foremost, buy the best bow you possibly can buy. Now, if there's a budget, you have to keep in budget that you got to buy accessories, you have to buy arrows, you have to buy a release, you have to buy a bow case. Now, some of those things you can add later on, like a bow case, right? If you're willing to take your bow home and keep it in your house or something like that for a few months prior to hunting season, so that the bow only travels in the back seat of your car to the archery range to shoot or something, that's fine. Save that money and put it into the bow so you can buy the very most accurate bow you possibly can. Now, I'm not going to get into brand names, so this channel isn't going to be about me promoting any brand. Now, do I have my opinion on brands? 100%. But the one thing that I will tell you, there are a lot of wonderful brands out there today, and there are a lot of brands that are just flat line. There's not one that's better than the other. Now, are there companies that do a better job of marketing? 100%. Do they have more social media influence? Do they have more magazine influence? Do they have more outdoor magazine influence? Do they have outdoor media influence? Sure, absolutely. But with that being said, it doesn't mean that that company necessarily is better than everybody else. There's always a good, better, best. And so when purchasing a bow, the first and foremost is the bow itself. So do your research on a bow, and be careful where you get your research from. If you're gonna go to a Ford dealer and ask him about the brand new Chevys, you're gonna get a pretty interesting, pretty interesting opinion. I don't think that they're gonna give you the exact, maybe the exact correct information, because they're gonna pull themselves out to look a little bit better. So be careful where you get your information. Do some information and do some reading for yourself, because marketing is marketing. Facts are facts. The one thing that I'll tell you about a pro shop, if you go into a legitimate pro shop, and that's another thing that we're going to talk about on one of these episodes, is legitimate pro shops, because there's definitely a difference between a pro shop and a not pro shop, okay? And there's a lot of great, wonderful pro shops across the country, but there's a lot of I'm not going to swear on here, but there's a lot of half-hearted pro shops across the country as well. And a lot of those include big box stores. So gather your information from a very reliable source. One thing that I pride myself in our stores is making sure that my employees have the knowledge. Look, the one thing that you can't take away from a pro shop, they tune every single bow out there. Just because they don't sell X brand of bow, they still tune it. That bow still comes in the shop and gets tuned. So are they going to be partial to the brands they sell? Absolutely. But there's a lot of pro shops out there that will get lopsided in bow sales and in bow manufacturers just because they go off the shelf easier. But do your research on the bow so that you know what you're buying. So first and foremost, the bow itself. The bow itself, you cannot, let me repeat this, you cannot buy accessories to make a bow perform better. Now, hold on, some of you may have heard that wrong. You cannot make a bad bow shoot better by buying better accessories. Now, can you enhance a bow's performance with better accessories? 100%. So before you all go into the comments and start saying, oh, that's not true. Yes, it is. You can't take a bow that is extremely inconsistent and doesn't tune and turn around and put $900 worth of accessories on it and make the bow tune better. It won't happen, okay? The bow has to work with itself. So that being said, the bow is the very first and foremost, in my opinion. Number two is the rest. Now, I'm not gonna jump into a bunch of options of rests here, but I'm gonna say, we'll talk about rests on one of these later episodes, but the rest itself magnifies what the bow's potential really is. So keep that in mind when you're buying a bow. If you buy a bow and put a cheap rest on it, or a rest that doesn't have the capabilities of performance that the bow does, you are handicapping the ability of the bow itself. The third thing, and this is where I'm going to say a lot of people will disagree with me, but the third thing is the arrow itself. Why the arrow? Because the arrow's consistency of getting from point A to point B over and over and over again, multiple times, and in the same fashion of accuracy each single time, that's what you judge your bow's performance on, right? So it kind of, and I hate to jump into a rabbit hole here, but it's like the broadhead. In my opinion, the broadhead is the most controversial thing that we sell in a pro shop. You know why? Because every single person judges the recovery of that animal based on the broadhead. If you recover that animal, the broadhead did its job. If you don't recover that animal, the broadhead didn't do its job. And that's not correct. If you don't place the arrow in the right spot, I don't care what broadhead you have on there. It's not going to do the job. Accuracy, accuracy, accuracy. It is the most important thing when it comes to a bow. The most deadly thing in your quiver, as you've heard me say before, is accuracy. So first and foremost is the bow itself. Now this happens to be an elite. Doesn't mean I'm promoting elite. It just happens to be the closest bow that was hanging up here on the rack. This bow right here is a very accurate bow. So is the one right behind it that's a Bowtech. So is the one sitting right next to it that's a Matthews. So this was the first one on the rack. Now, that being said, each one of those brands that I just said have a great bow. But that doesn't mean they're the best bow company. I don't think there's a best bow company. There are bow companies out there that own a larger market share due to marketing, but it doesn't mean they're the best, so to speak. So don't get caught up in the media as much as understanding, value your pro shop. Go in and talk to the guys. Ask them what bows they shoot the most. What bows do you tune and tune the very best? That is my very first question. When a guy comes into the shop and says, hey Brian, what bow would you recommend? First of all, we represent 4 bow lines. So you're gonna hear every one of those bow lines names. But if the guy's really smart, he'll say, Brian, which bow tunes the best? And my next question to you is, are you a do-it-yourselfer? Like, do you want to be able to play with this bow at home? Because if you do, there's a couple brands that I'm going to recommend to you. If no, I'm a pro shop guy and I want the bow tuned here and I'm going to always bring it back to have you guys tune it, then pick from any one of the 4. They all shoot great. Whichever one feels better in your hand, and as long as you're shopping the top shelf, you're not going to have a problem with the consistency inside of that bow. So I'm going to keep it simple and we're going to keep this short, but again, I'm sorry if I dove down a couple rabbit holes, and I'm sorry if you're going to see this tape cut up and you're going to say, oh, they cut something out there. You're going to see a lot of this. And look, I am not a professional videographer. I'm not a professional YouTuber. And I'm not a professional, what do you call it? The person that actually puts out the editing. Yeah. I'm not a professional editor either. So if my face is talking one time and all of a sudden it blips, I went down a rabbit hole. So you're probably going to see that a few times. But thanks for joining us for episode number 2. And now episode number 3, we're going to get into why we have all these arrows and why we spend the money on arrows. But I'm going to show you what you guys are probably, most of you are forgetting to do with your arrows that actually are the closing factor in sealing the deal of what makes arrow 1 fly like arrow number 2 or all the way to arrow number 12. So stick with us. We'll be back for episode number 3 where we're going to talk about arrows, why they have numbers on them, why they're all fletched the same color, and again, we're not going to talk about brand. We're just going to go about the simplicity of arrows and why that is one of my most important factors, I think, in the game of accuracy, recovery of animals, and consistency. So stick with us. We'll be back for episode number 3. Thank you.